Hello, my name is Andy, and I am the village idiot, and I'm armed with a car and a GoPro, and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. Welcome back to Burnley, to parish number 6 in the series, and you might recall that last time out in Worsthorne with Hurstwood, I said that this one was going to be quite difficult. It's the one I feared the most out of the 8. The reason for it is quite simple. This one is not made up of just one village, it's made up of 4, and there's also a suburb of Burnley as well to cover in this one. None of these villages nor the suburb have the name of the parish. I've got to go to Walk Mill, Mirklough, Holme Chapel, Overtown and that little suburb of Burnley, and they're all in the parish of Cliviger. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. So this is Cliviger, and this one's going to be presented a little differently to what you're used to. Keep in mind, this one is massive and full of so much history that there's no way I can cover everything. In theory, all the villages form one giant settlement. It's a little hard at times to distinguish where one starts and another ends, like for example between Walk Mill and Holme Chapel. According to the 2011 census, the parish only has a population of 2,238, which is less than Worsthorne with Hurstwood, and that shows you how spread out this one really is. Contrary to popular and in some cases mistaken local belief, there's no village of Cliviger, although as I'll allude to later, Google does mark Cliviger on its maps. Although the whole parish lies within the borough of Burnley, there are a few farms lying in either the Todmorden or Bacup postal areas. The principal settlement within the parish is Walk Mill, which is where we are here. It lies in the bottom of a valley, sited on Burnley Road, where it passes over the River Calder. Nowadays, Cliviger as a whole is mainly a dormitory area for people working in Burnley and other towns in East Lancashire and West Yorkshire, but it has had quite an industrial past. Here's a bit of Cliviger's history. It was once a township in the ancient parish of... Okay, I'll stop that line right there because you can fill that one in yourselves by now. It's not mentioned in the Domesday book, but the survey of the wider area, which was known as Blackburnshire, is brief. Around 1160, a plough land, which was possibly the whole of the township, was granted to the recently founded Kirkstall Abbey in Leeds, and the monks made a grange here. However, sometime later, Richard de Elland was allowed to reclaim it, and Robert de Lacy, the Lord of Clitheroe, granted Accrington to the monks instead. Kirkstall would hold Cliviger until 1287. There's a lack of certainty as to the origin of the name Cliviger. The Reverend Dr. Thomas Dunham Whitaker, historian and theologian, was the curate of Holme Chapel. He theorised that the origin was Saxon from the words Clivig and Shire, meaning rocky district. However, in 1922, Ellet Eckwall felt the name meant steep slope farmland. So you get a good impression from here how Walk Mill hugs the bottom of the valley, and I suspect all the other villages are just like this as well within Cliviger. There appears to have been a family called de Cliviger in the 14th century, although they now seem to have all died out. The parish is located at the northwestern entrance to Cliviger Gorge, which extends to the southeast. It's regarded as a remarkable example of a glacial valley that follows a fault line. Cliviger used to be a little bigger than what it is today. In 1897, an area of the parish, including parts of the villages of Cornholme and Portsmouth, were added to Todmorden. Here's a bit about Walk Mill specifically. A weaving shed was built here in Walk Mill in 1876, and in between the wars there were 736 looms in it. It closed in 1958 and has now been demolished. There used to be a pub called the Gordon Lennox, and it opened in 1892, named after Lady Emily Frances Gordon Lennox, daughter of Charles Townley and wife of Lord Alexander Gordon Lennox. It superseded an earlier building across the road and has since been demolished to make way for a housing development. Open cast coal mining took place in the 1940s and 1950s above Thieveley Scout and on Deerplay Moor, the site of two walking drag lines. These were called Scylla and Charybdis. The areas were subsequently backfilled and landscaped. Walk Mill has a few bits and bobs of interest, like for example Mount Zion Independent Methodist Chapel, which was built in 1853 and superseded an earlier building of 1835. There's also an SR petrol station on the main Burnley Road, which doubles as a shop, so Walk Mill theoretically at least does have a form of retail service. There's a garage too. This is White House Services, almost directly opposite the petrol station. There's a couple of notable landmarks as well. This is Cliviger Depot. It's a highways depot where stocks of salt are held in readiness for continued wintry weather. Check out this railway bridge. The East Lancashire line passes through Cliviger Parish, skirting the southern edge of Walk Mill. This is the same stretch of line we saw in Habergem Eaves. Here's the River Calder, which is viewed here from a nice little wooden bridge, which I found to be quite a calming spot. All you can hear is the water rushing underneath you. Park Road itself is arguably one of the most historic parts of Walk Mill, so much so the locals felt the need to erect a board telling you all about it. So Park Road here in Walk Mill turns out to be one of the most historic places in the entire village, and probably within the entire parish of Cliviger as well. Look how much information is on this board here. There's all sorts of things on here. We've got a brewery, a corn mill, a hall, a smithy, two smithies in fact, something called the band room, Union Pit, Clifton Terrace, some shops, loads. Absolutely loads, way more than I can fit in one video. Okay, so that was a nice little walk around Walk Mill. In itself, that would have made a nice video on its own, but of course it's part of a larger parish, the parish of Cliviger. The next place we're going is Holme Chapel. Holme Chapel is on Burnley Road, around a mile away from Walk Mill. This has connections to the Whitaker family, who lived at a house known as the Home. In fact, because of that house and the associated chapel close by, that's how Holme Chapel got its name, and the Whitakers were major landowners. Holme Chapel has a long history with the rearing of sheep. There's something called the Holme Sheep Fair, which is held every September and has been going on for hundreds of years. Today, it also includes the Holme Sheepdog Trials Association Championship and the Thieveley Pike Fell Race, organised by Clayton Limore's Harriers. This footpath leads to a former station that Holme Chapel once had. In 1907 there was a rail crash close to the station when coal-laden wagons detached themselves from a train bound for Burnley. The village hall's original name was the Victoria Institute. It opened in 1904 and provides a variety of social events to this day. It has a nickname too, the Pink Elephant. The Church of St John the Divine is an active Anglican parish church in the Diocese of Blackburn and is recorded in the National Heritage List for England as a Grade 2 listed building. It was built between 1788 and 1794, replacing a small chapel, and is in simple classical style. Above the west front is a bell turret with an octagonal cupola. Inside the church are carved oak stalls, moved from a demolished church, which include a poppy head and misericords. I'm sure people have heard the saying, it's grim up north. It's not. Certainly not. Even on a day like today, it's not. Look at that view. Here's the Queen Hotel, which is named after Queen Victoria. It was built in 1863. The local Conservative club used to meet here, earning it the nickname the Blue Pig. The Ram Inn is the other pub in Holme Chapel, and this is likely the oldest building in the village, with records first making a reference to it in 1630. It's had several names too. These include Causeway Side, the Pear Tree, the Tup and the Ram. At one time, the Ram Inn was one of a number of buildings owned by the Whitaker family. St John's School is the oldest of its type in Burnley. It dates from 1822. The present buildings, though, date from 1838, and there's been several extensions over the years. There are 3 war memorials in Cliviger. The main one is located outside the church in Holme Chapel. There's also one at the Mount Zion Chapel in Walk Mill and at the old Deer Play Inn. Here's a blue plaque to the Reverend Thomas Dunham Whitaker, often called the Historian of Whalley. He's credited with planting many of the trees in the immediate vicinity of Holme Chapel. And there's another blue plaque on the side of the Ram Inn. This one is about Eric Halsall, a former Cliviger resident, known for being a commentator on the BBC TV series One Man and His Dog. So in much the same way as in Walk Mill, we have an information board here at this shelter about Holme Chapel. Notice how it's called Holme in Cliviger. Now Mirklough is the same as that. When we reach that in a few moments time, it's also called Mirklough in Cliviger. So there's loads of information on this board, and once again I'll take some pictures of this and see what I can pull off it for you. The shelter itself dates back to the time of the Queen's coronation and was built on the site of one of Holme Chapel's former blacksmith shops. We'll talk more about the blacksmith when we reach Overtown. Alright, that's Holme Chapel, or if you will, Holme in Cliviger. Next stop, Overtown. Now I should just mention the area that I'm driving through here to get to Overtown is marked on Google Maps as Cliviger. However, you'll not find any village signs, and you certainly will not find any reference to Cliviger anywhere else apart from on that map. This area, I believe, is actually part of Holme Chapel. It doesn't seem to be its own thing. Overtown is at the junctions of Redleys Road with Mount Lane and Greencliff Lane. The parish playing fields and the Jerry Dawson Sports Pavilion are located on Mount Lane. That's a handy way to transition into the tale of Jerry Dawson. He was a long-serving Burnley FC goalkeeper. Dawson was born in Cliviger and lived all his life in the parish. He's notable for the fact that he missed playing in the 1914 FA Cup final, which Burnley won due to illness. Concerned that the illness might affect the whole team's chances, and at the time substitutes were not allowed, he told the manager the day before he would not be fit to play. As a reward for his thoughtfulness and sportsmanship, the FA decided to award Dawson a winner's medal despite the fact he hadn't played, and that's a tradition that's carried on to this day. The sports pavilion on the playing fields at Mount Lane was rededicated as the Jerry Dawson Pavilion in 2010. Overtown is where the parish's book exchange is located, inside what looks like an old bus shelter. I couldn't tell you if there's a phone box or not here though. Mind you, this seems like a pretty good use of the building. It seems like it's well used too, which is always good to see. Being an agricultural area primarily, it's not surprising that we see some old ploughs here. The blacksmiths in Holme Chapel were in big demand for agricultural tools just like these. They made things like carts, ploughs, harrows, sickles, billhooks and scythes, as well as horseshoes, and the hand looms at Walk Mill also needed metal pieces as well. Turned out nice again. And let's make no mistake about it, up here you do get the most amazing views across the valley. Here I am to explain what you can see from Overtown. Right, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of reference as to where we are right now. I'm at the southern end of Overtown. The settlement you can see there is the one I drove through, the part of Holme Chapel that's referred to as Cliviger on Google Maps. Holme Chapel is to the left and Walk Mill is to the right at the bottom of the hill. And by the way, what a view! What a view! So now to Mirklough, where the history continues. The remains of a Bronze Age burial mound is known to exist on Moseley Height above Mirklough. That was excavated by Burnley Historical Society in 1950. Finds included cremation urns, other pot shards, spindle walls, beads and flint tools. These are all now in the collection at Townley Hall. Another burial cairn existed behind Law House at Mirklough. An Iron Age gold torque was also found, which is now in the Manchester Museum. There have also been some Roman coin finds and suggestions that remains at Easton and another site near Mirklough were small Roman forts. Mirklough is at the junction of Redleys Road with the Long Causeway. There were two public houses here, although one now has been converted into something else. Colonel Charles Townley's horse Kettledrum won the 1861 Epsom Derby. Popular legend has it that the winnings from that particular race paid for the building of the one remaining pub. There's also been an alehouse on that site, however, since at least 1848, so it may only have been that the pub was renamed to commemorate the victory. Let's see those two buildings. Here is Nino's Restaurant and Bar, which is within the former Fighting Cocks pub. And this is the Kettledrum right on the junction with the Long Causeway. A silver-mounted horse's hoof inkwell kept behind the bar in the pub is claimed to be from the race-winning horse itself. The Long Causeway is believed to be an ancient transport link between Lancashire and Yorkshire, possibly dating back to the Bronze Age. The valley has always been a link between the two counties. Of course, this is an area that's perfect for the avid cyclist. National Route 68 passes through this area, and if you come by on your bike, there's a handy map in Mirklough to show you where you can go. Now, by far and away, the most interesting part of Mirklough comes in the form of a now demolished chapel which has been replaced by a garden. Mirklough Chapel was opened in 1824, a school was added in 1865. A large portion of the building was damaged by coal mining in 1883 and the chapel had to be closed whilst it was rebuilt. Unfortunately, in the 20th century, further repairs were required, but a lack of support meant that the building could not be maintained and the chapel was demolished in 1966. A casualty of the Boer War is buried in the Old Chapel graveyard. On the subject of graves, there are also 3 official war graves from the First World War in the churchyard at Holme Chapel. And that's Mirklough, and that leaves us with the suburb of Burnley. But before we go there, it's time for today's Picture Bit, and here that comes right now. with we're in that suburb of Burnley. It doesn't seem to have a name, although Red Lees is a phrase I've seen quite a few times around here, so we'll just call it that for now, Red Lees. Let's have a look around and see what we can find. So to finish with, we're in an area that I'm going to refer to as Red Lees, even though I have no idea if it's actually called that. Whatever its name, it's a fairly large housing estate on the border with Burnley. And housing is pretty much all that it is. There's no amenities to speak of, barring a bus shelter, where I end this mini walk around in a few moments. That gives me an opportunity to give you some other bits of information about Cliviger. The highest point in the parish is Hoofstone's Height on Stipard Moor to the northeast, at 475.5 metres above sea level. Local legend tells of a spectral huntsman and his hounds that appear in Cliviger Gorge at Halloween. An account of a journey through the gorge is made in Ainsworth's novel Mist over Pendle. The parish contains the sources of Lancashire's River Calder, Yorkshire's River Calder, and the River Irwell, meaning it lies astride the main watershed of Great Britain. Everage Clough, a tributary of the Lancashire Calder, forms the parish's western boundary as far as Crown Point, and you'll recall that's the location of the Singing Ringing Tree, also in Cliviger. And we're this deep into a video and we still haven't discussed demographics yet. Can you believe it? That's how hard this one has been to put together. Cliviger's demographics look like this. 99.3% of the residents out here are white British and the population density is 77.83. Very low, but after all, Cliviger is Burnley's largest parish in terms of size at a massive 27.27 square kilometres. And that all-important house price in this lovely historic corner of Lancashire, which by the way I recommend to anyone to visit, is a tidy £201,000. So look at this here, we've got an old boundary stone, Cliviger on the right, Burnshire on the left. Okay, that's it for the parish of Cliviger. I've been everywhere within the parish. Walkmill, Mirklough, Home Chapel, Overtown, and this area of Burnley, which I'm calling Red Lees. Please do let me know if this area does have a name, because it doesn't have one on the map. It would be nice to know what it's called. Regardless, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to move on now to my next one here in Burnley, and we have 2 left to go. This has been the parish of Cliviger, and I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiots, and I'm out.